You have been losing power your entire life, and you never even realized it. Every single day, every single moment. In every room you have entered, in every conversation you have had, in every relationship you have built, you have been surrendering something so valuable, so irreplaceable, that no amount of money, no title, no achievement could ever give it back to you once it was gone. Your mind, your attention, your control. It did not feel like weakness. It never does. It felt normal. It felt like participation. It felt like connection. It felt like the right thing to do in the moment. You responded when you should have been silent. You explained yourself when no explanation was required. You reacted when reaction was the very thing they wanted from you. You allowed others to occupy space in your mind that they had never earned, never paid for, and never deserved. And while you were doing this, while you were giving away the most precious resource you possess, others were watching, others were studying, others were learning exactly how to reach inside you and pull the strings that controlled your behavior. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry. This is the cold, precise mechanism by which power is transferred from those who do not understand it to those who do. Think carefully about the last time someone provoked you. Think about the last time you felt the fire rise inside your chest because of something someone said, something someone did, something someone implied. And ask yourself in that moment who was in control. Was it you, or was it them? Most people answer this question honestly and realize something deeply uncomfortable. They were not in control. They were reacting. They were operating exactly as the other person intended. They were predictable. And predictability, in the architecture of power, is the most dangerous weakness a person can possess. Every time you revealed your anger, you handed someone a map to your vulnerabilities. Every time you sought approval, you informed others that your confidence was conditional. Every time you over-explained, you betrayed that you needed to be understood, that their judgment of you carried weight, that you were not fully grounded in your own authority. This is the silent erosion. Invisible, constant, cumulative. It does not happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in thousands of small ones. The unnecessary response, the defensive explanation, the emotional outburst that felt justified but cost you more than you understood. The attempt to be liked by people whose respect was never worth pursuing. The time spent performing for an audience that was quietly cataloging your weaknesses. Most people will live their entire lives inside this pattern. They will grow older. They will accumulate experience. But they will never understand the mechanism by which their power was quietly, steadily, invisibly stripped away. But tonight is different. Tonight, you will understand something that changes everything. Not a motivational phrase, not a positive affirmation, a principle, an ancient, proven, ruthlessly accurate principle that separates those who move through the world with true authority from those who merely believe they do. Pay close attention, because what follows is not wisdom you will hear in most places. It is the kind of truth that, once understood, cannot be unseen. There is something you possess right now that is more valuable than money, more powerful than status, more dangerous than any weapon, more sought after than any resource on this planet. It is your attention, not your talent, not your skill, not your intelligence or your network or your ambition. Your attention, the simple, irreplaceable act of focusing your mind on something, of giving a person, a moment, or an idea the energy of your awareness. This is the currency that controls everything. When a man wants to be seen, what does he seek? Your attention. When a woman wants to feel valued, what is she actually asking for? Your attention. When a company spends billions of dollars on advertising, what are they purchasing? Your attention. When a politician speaks on a stage, what are they fighting for? Your attention. Attention is the one resource that every single person on this earth is constantly attempting to acquire from others. It is the foundation of influence. It is the mechanism of power, and you have been giving it away as though it were free. It is not free. Every time you give your attention to something that has not earned it, you are making a transfer. A real, measurable, consequential transfer of energy from you to something or someone else. And in most cases, that transfer serves them far more than it serves you. Think about the people in your life who hold genuine authority, not the people who are loud, not the people who perform confidence, the people who actually carry weight in a room, the people whose words land differently, whose presence changes the atmosphere. What do these people have in common? They are selective. They do not give their attention to everyone. They do not respond to every provocation. They do not explain themselves to those who have not earned explanation. They do not seek approval from crowds. They do not perform for the entertainment of others. They move through the world with a quiet, deliberate economy of engagement, and this economy is the very source of their power. When a person knows that your attention is difficult to earn, they begin to value it. When they understand that your reaction is not guaranteed, they become uncertain. And uncertainty, strategically placed in the mind of another, is one of the most powerful forces available to any human being. Most people misuse their attention in three critical ways. First, they give it reactively. Something happens, and they immediately respond, without calculation, without strategy, without understanding what the response reveals about them. They let the external world dictate the internal state. They let others hold the key to their emotional architecture. Second, they give it indiscriminately. They extend the same quality of attention to enemies as they do to allies, to strangers as they do to intimates, to distractions as they do to priorities. They have not developed the discipline of selection, and without selection, there is no scarcity, and without scarcity, there is no value. Third, they give it seeking return. They give attention because they want attention back. They respond because they want to be acknowledged. They engage because they need validation. And this need, this deep, visible, exploitable need, is the precise mechanism through which others gain control over them. The Machiavellian understands something different. He understands that the withdrawal of attention is often more powerful than its extension. That the person who needs nothing from you is the one you think about most. That the silence of someone who could speak is more authoritative than the noise of someone who always does. From this moment forward, you must begin to treat your attention as capital, not to be spent freely, not to be wasted on those who have not earned it, not to be surrendered in moments of weakness or emotional impulse. It is a resource, a finite, precious, strategic resource, and how you allocate it will determine the quality of power you hold in every relationship, every room, every encounter for the rest of your life. More than 500 years ago, a man sat in a small house in Florence, Italy, stripped of his position, exiled from the city he had served, and wrote the most dangerous book in the history of power. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli. He had spent decades in the corridors of power. He had served the Florentine Republic as a diplomat, an administrator, a strategist. He had sat across from kings and cardinals and warriors. He had watched men rise to positions of extraordinary authority and collapse from them without understanding why. He had seen weakness disguised as virtue and strength disguised as cruelty. He had observed human nature in its most raw, unfiltered, unperformed state. And when they stripped him of everything, when they imprisoned him, when they tortured him and exiled him, he did not grow bitter. He did not abandon his inquiry. He sat down and wrote what he had actually observed, not what people wished were true about power, what was actually true. Machiavelli watched rulers rise and rulers fall. He watched men of immense talent destroyed by their inability to control their own emotions. He watched lesser men hold extraordinary power simply because they had mastered the discipline of strategic restraint. He watched alliances shift not because of policy, but because of perception, because of presence, because of the invisible signals that powerful men send and that weak men cannot stop sending. What he discovered was this: the most powerful individuals were never the loudest. They were the most controlled. They were not the most emotional. They were the most disciplined in the management of their emotions. They were not the most popular. They were the most respected and often the most feared. They were not the most transparent. They were the most strategic in what they revealed, what they concealed, and what they allowed others to believe. Machiavelli wrote for princes, for rulers, for men who held the weight of civilizations in their decisions. But the principles he identified do not belong to any century or any throne. They belong to human nature itself, and human nature has not changed. The man in a meeting room operates by the same psychological laws as the prince in a palace. The woman navigating a social hierarchy faces the same invisible forces as the cardinal navigating Rome. The person sitting in traffic, being cut off, deciding whether to react or remain composed, they are enacting the same choice that Machiavelli's princes faced on far grander stages. Power has always operated on the same principles. The arena changes, the stakes change, the costumes change, the principles do not. Machiavelli understood that power is not moral and not immoral. It is a force, like gravity, like weather. It does not care about your intentions. It does not reward your sincerity. It does not give credit for effort. It responds only to understanding and to the disciplined application of that understanding. He observed that the ruler who was most loved in moments of peace was often destroyed when crisis arrived, because love is a bond held by obligation, and obligation is easily broken under pressure. But the ruler who was most respected, even feared, held a different kind of bond. A bond rooted not in sentiment, but in the recognition of capacity, in the understanding that this person operated from a different level of awareness, that they could not be easily reached, that they could not be easily moved. This is what we are building tonight. Not a performance of power, not a mask, something deeper, a genuine transformation in how you understand yourself, how you protect yourself, and how you move through a world that will perpetually attempt to gain access to what is most valuable inside you. Machiavelli gave us the map. Tonight, we learn to read it. Power does not come from volume. It does not come from aggression. It does not come from dominance performed for an audience. It does not come from the size of your vocabulary, or the sharpness of your insults, or the speed of your retaliation. Power comes from control, specifically from the control of your own mind, from the discipline of your own thought, from the mastery of your own reactions, from the ability to observe what is happening around you without being consumed by it, from the capacity to understand what others need from you and to choose deliberately whether to provide it. This is where most people fail, and they fail not because they are weak. They fail because they have been taught the wrong definition of strength. Society teaches you that strength is action, that the powerful person is the one who responds, who pushes back, who makes their presence known, who does not back down. This is the mythology of strength, and like most mythologies, it contains just enough truth to be dangerous. True strength is restraint, not passive restraint, not the restraint of the person who has no response, the restraint of the person who has a devastating response available and chooses not to use it. The restraint of the person who could speak and chooses silence, who could react and chooses observation, who could explain and chooses presence. This is the most difficult discipline in human experience, because every instinct you have was designed for speed. Your nervous system was built in an era when threats required immediate physical response. Fight or flee, react or die. The biological architecture of your mind is optimized for reaction. Power requires you to override that architecture. Power is quiet, power is selective, power is controlled. When you master the discipline of your own mind, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see things that others cannot. Because when you are not consumed by reaction, when you are not flooded with the adrenaline of emotional response, you can observe, you can calculate, you can see the game that is being played around you with the clarity of someone who is not inside it. The reactive person is always inside the game, always a piece being moved. The disciplined person can step outside the board, can watch the patterns, can understand the mechanisms, can wait for the precise moment when action will have maximum effect and act then, and only then. Your mind, when undisciplined, is a liability. When provoked, it reveals your fears. When flattered, it reveals your vanity. When threatened, it reveals your insecurities. When desperate, it reveals your needs. Every emotion you express without deliberate choice is a transmission, and the people around you are receiving it, cataloging it, and learning how to use it. Your mind, when disciplined, is a weapon of extraordinary precision. It becomes a thing that others cannot read, cannot predict, cannot control. And when people cannot predict you, when they cannot find the levers that move you, when your reactions are not guaranteed by their provocations, they become something very useful to you. Uncertain. Uncertain people make mistakes. Uncertain people seek validation. Uncertain people try harder. Uncertain people reveal more than they intend. Uncertain people give power to whoever appears most certain. And certainty, quiet, grounded, unshakable certainty, is not something that comes from circumstance. It is not something that external validation can provide. It is not something you perform. It is something you build. In the silence, in the discipline, in the thousands of small moments when you chose control over reaction and learned, gradually, that your mind is in fact a weapon, one of the most powerful weapons available to any human being. Use it, deliberately, strategically, without mercy, toward your own weakness, or surrender it. To every provocation, every manipulation, every person who has learned that you can be moved. Those are the only two options. When you stop reacting, Something happens inside the minds of others that they cannot control and often cannot understand. Their certainty becomes uncertainty. This is not metaphor. This is the precise psychological mechanism by which mental discipline transfers power from one person to another. The human brain is a prediction machine. Its primary function is not logic, not reason, not creativity. Its primary function is prediction. It is constantly, obsessively, trying to predict what will happen next so that it can prepare a response. It does this with weather, with traffic, with social situations, and above all, it does this with people. When you are predictable, you are giving the people around you exactly what their brain wants. You are feeding their prediction engine. They know how to provoke you. They know what flattery will move you. They know what criticism will wound you. They know what silence will create anxiety in you. They have mapped your reactions, and with that map, they can navigate you. When you become unpredictable, not erratically, not chaotically, but through genuine discipline and strategic withholding, their prediction engine fails. And when that engine fails, the brain registers something it deeply dislikes: the loss of control. This loss of control produces a cascade of psychological effects that work entirely in your favor. First comes uncertainty. They cannot predict your response, so they begin to question their own judgment. Am I reading this correctly? Did I misjudge them? What are they thinking? This uncertainty draws their focus toward you. You occupy more of their mental real estate. You become a problem their brain is working to solve, even when you are not in the room. Then comes elevation. The human brain, when it cannot explain something, tends to assign significance to it. The person who does not react as expected is perceived not as broken but as different, as operating from a different level, as possessing something that ordinary people do not. This is the psychology behind mystique, behind the authority of the genuinely powerful. They are elevated not because they performed elevation, but because their restraint created it. Then comes obsession. This is perhaps the most powerful effect. When someone cannot reach you emotionally, psychologically they begin to want to reach you. It is counterintuitive but deeply consistent with human psychology. What resists us draws us. The person who is easy to affect becomes boring. The person who cannot be affected becomes a fixation. You have experienced this. Think of the person in your life whose approval you most desperately wanted. Were they the most generous with their praise? Almost certainly not. They were probably selective. They were probably difficult to read. Their approval, when it came, meant something precisely because it was not guaranteed. This is not a coincidence. This is the mechanism. Selective engagement creates perceived scarcity. Perceived scarcity creates perceived value. Perceived value creates influence. And influence, steadily cultivated through consistent discipline, becomes genuine authority. There is another dimension to this psychology, one that Machiavelli understood with surgical precision. When you maintain control of your emotional state, in the presence of someone who is trying to provoke a reaction from you, you are not merely refusing them what they want. You are demonstrating something about the relationship between you. You are demonstrating that they do not have access to you, that they do not hold the keys, that their power over your internal state is exactly what you choose it to be, nothing more. This demonstration does not need to be announced. It does not need to be explained. It communicates itself. And what it communicates, in the language that power understands above all others, is dominance. Not aggressive dominance, not performed dominance. The quiet, absolute dominance of someone who has decided they will not be moved and cannot be moved by anything you send their way. Understanding is not transformation. Transformation requires application. And application requires that you begin making different choices starting now, starting today, starting in the next conversation you have. Here is where the theory becomes practice. You stop explaining yourself to those who have not earned explanation. This single behavior, applied consistently, will begin shifting the dynamic in more relationships than you expect. Most people explain themselves out of a subconscious need for approval. They want the other person to understand, to agree, to validate. But every unnecessary explanation is a signal. It says, "Your opinion of me matters enough that I will justify my choices to you." Begin noticing when you explain. Ask yourself, does this person deserve this information? Have they earned access to my reasoning? If the answer is no, be silent. Let your decision stand without support. You stop reacting to provocation immediately. When something angers you, when something wounds you, when something triggers the fire in your chest, pause. Not forever, not as avoidance, but long enough to choose your response rather than release your reaction. The gap between stimulus and response is where all power lies. Expand that gap, train it, protect it. You become selective in your engagement. Not everyone deserves your energy. Not every conversation deserves your full presence. Not every criticism deserves your attention. Begin making deliberate choices about where you invest yourself. When you attend a meeting, a dinner, a conversation fully present, let that presence be felt. And when someone or something does not merit your full investment, be economical, be cordial if necessary, be effective if required, but be selective, always. You practice strategic silence. Silence is not the absence of power, it is one of its purest expressions. The person who speaks less in a room but speaks with absolute precision holds more authority than the person who fills every silence with sound. Begin treating silence as a tool. Use it to observe. Use it to create weight. Use it to allow others to reveal themselves, because most people, when faced with silence, will fill it. And what they fill it with tells you everything you need to know. You practice emotional withdrawal from those who have not earned emotional investment. This does not mean coldness. It does not mean cruelty. It means that your emotional reactions, your genuine responses of care, of anger, of warmth, of disappointment, are not distributed freely. They are reserved for those who have demonstrated, through consistent behavior over time, that they are trustworthy recipients. You begin making decisions from your own values rather than from the need to be understood. A person who needs to be understood is a person whose behavior can be predicted by anyone who appears to understand them. When you release the need for understanding, when you act from your own judgment, your own values, your own strategic calculation, you become genuinely harder to manipulate, because manipulation requires access. And you have begun to restrict access. These are not abstract principles. Apply them today. Apply them in the next difficult conversation. Apply them the next time someone tries to provoke a reaction from you. Apply them the next time you feel the impulse to explain yourself to someone whose judgment of you carries no weight. Each application is practice. Each moment of discipline is a deposit. And over time, the compound interest of consistent self-mastery becomes something that no performance could ever replicate. Genuine, tested, unshakable authority. There are forces that will attempt to break this discipline. You need to understand them clearly, not because they are to be feared, because they are to be recognized, and recognition is the first act of neutralization. The first enemy is the provocateur. The provocateur exists in every environment. They are the person who needs your reaction. They survive on emotional responses. When you react to them, they are fed. When you defend yourself, they have won not because their argument was superior, but because they pulled you out of your position. They are not interested in truth or resolution. They are interested in control. And the specific control they seek is the ability to move you, to demonstrate to themselves and to others that they have access to your emotional state. The discipline against the provocateur is complete non-reaction. Not hostile silence that is still a reaction. True non-reaction. The genuine absence of disturbance. When you encounter the provocateur, you observe them with the same emotional investment you would give to weather. It is raining. You note this. You adjust accordingly. You do not argue with the rain. The second enemy is the flatterer. The flatterer is more dangerous than the provocateur because they approach through pleasure rather than pain. They tell you what you want to hear. They reflect your best image back at you. And in doing so, they create a dependency, a gentle, pleasurable dependency on their approval. And the person who needs your approval holds power over you because they can always threaten to withdraw it. The discipline against the flatterer is not cynicism. It is discernment. Learn to distinguish between genuine recognition offered without agenda, grounded in specific and honest observation, and strategic flattery, which is warm, general, and timed around something the flatterer wants from you. The warm feeling of being seen is real, even when the intent behind it is manipulation. Your nervous system cannot distinguish. Your judgment must. The third enemy is the energy drainer. This is the person who does not attack and does not flatter. They simply consume. They bring every conversation to their problems. They require constant emotional investment. They create crises that demand your involvement. They are not necessarily malicious. Many energy drainers are simply wounded people who have never learned to manage their own emotional states. But regardless of intent, the effect is the same. They drain resources that you need for your own development and operation. The discipline against the energy drainer is compassionate limitation. You can acknowledge their pain without carrying it. You can be kind without being available. You can set boundaries not as punishment but as management because you understand that your energy is finite and its allocation is strategic. The fourth enemy is the internal critic. This is perhaps the most dangerous of all because it lives inside you. It is the voice that says the discipline is arrogance, that silence is coldness, that restraint is cowardice, that you are simply afraid of engagement and calling it strategy. The internal critic frames every act of self-mastery as a failure of character. You must learn to recognize this voice for what it is, the internalized expectation of others, the accumulated judgments of people who needed you to be manageable, the psychological residue of a lifetime of being told that emotional availability is virtue and emotional withholding is a flaw. It is not a flaw. Selectivity is not arrogance. Strategic silence is not coldness. Emotional discipline is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of feeling which is the most powerful thing a human being can develop. Your emotions will resist this transformation. This is not a failure, it is biology. Your emotional responses are not weaknesses to be ashamed of. They are ancient mechanisms designed for a world very different from the one you inhabit. They are fast, automatic, and powerful. And they will not quietly step aside simply because you have decided to develop discipline. They will demand reaction. They will generate urgency. They will tell you that remaining silent is weakness, that withholding your response is dishonest, that the person in front of you deserves to see your truth right now. This is where most self-development programs fail. They tell you to suppress your emotions, to perform calm while the storm rages beneath. This is not discipline, this is dissociation. And it will eventually collapse, because what is suppressed does not disappear. It accumulates. True emotional mastery is not the elimination of feeling. It is the management of expression. You feel everything. You choose what you express, when, and to whom. Begin with observation. Before you can manage your emotional states, you must become able to observe them, in real time, while they are happening. This is genuinely difficult, because the nature of strong emotion is to pull you inside of it, to collapse the distance between the observer and the observed, to make the feeling feel identical to reality. Practice noticing the feeling as separate from the situation. I am feeling anger. Not, this situation is enraging. One is about your internal state. One is about external reality. You can observe the first. You cannot control the second. Begin making this distinction constantly. Next, train the delay. In moments of emotional activation, introduce time between the sensation and the response. Start small. A breath, a pause before speaking. A moment to recognize what is happening before deciding what to do with it. Over time, extend this. The capacity to delay response under pressure is a trainable skill, not a personality trait you either have or do not. Build practices of mental solitude. Power requires that you know yourself, your actual self, not the self you perform in social situations. This knowledge comes from time spent in silence, in reflection, in the honest examination of your own patterns. What provokes you and why? What flatters you and why? What fears are driving behaviors you have been calling strategy? These are not comfortable questions. They are essential ones. Develop physical discipline. The connection between physical mastery and mental mastery is not coincidental. The person who trains their body to perform under discomfort is developing the exact same neural architecture that enables emotional restraint under pressure. The discomfort of physical training and the discomfort of emotional discipline are managed by the same mechanisms. Build one and you strengthen both. Study the patterns of your reactivity, not to punish yourself for them, to understand them. Where do you over-explain? Where do you seek approval? Where do you react with disproportionate emotion? These are the access points that others use to move you. Map them, not so that you can be ashamed of them, so that you can defend them. Finally, develop long-time horizons. Reactive people operate in the present tense. Their decisions are shaped by what they feel right now, by what they need in this moment, by the urgency of the immediate emotional experience. The disciplined person operates across time. They sacrifice the short-term satisfaction of reaction for the long-term compound interest of reputation, of mystery, of the kind of authority that only sustained discipline can build. This is not a process that produces results in a week. It produces results across months and years. But every single day of consistent practice changes you. Not in ways visible to others immediately, but in ways that you will feel. In the moments when you would have reacted and did not. In the conversations where you maintained your position without force. In the rooms where you were fully present and utterly unmoved. In the quiet accumulation of evidence that you are, in fact, someone who cannot be controlled. You are no longer the person who entered this conversation. Something has shifted. Not in your circumstances, those will change gradually as your behavior changes. Something has shifted in your understanding, in your relationship with your own mind, in the way you see the mechanisms that have always operated around you, through you, upon you, but that you are now beginning to see clearly for the first time. You see differently now. You can see the provocateur before they make their move. You can sense the flattery before it arrives. You can feel the energy drain before it begins. You can observe your own emotional activation in real time, from a position slightly outside it, with the calm clarity of someone who knows the difference between feeling and responding. This is not arrogance. This is not superiority. This is the shift that happens when a person stops being a piece in someone else's game and begins understanding the board. You think differently now. Where once you responded with immediacy, you now pause. Where once you explained with anxiety, you now speak only when necessary. Where once you gave your attention freely to whoever demanded it, you now allocate it deliberately, selectively, with full awareness of what you are offering and what it is worth. Your thoughts are no longer running you. You are running them. Not perfectly. No one achieves perfect discipline. But the difference between the person who is entirely at the mercy of their own reactions and the person who is developing the capacity to choose their responses is not a difference of degree. It is a difference of kind. You operate differently now. You move through rooms with a different quality of presence, not louder, quieter, not more aggressive, more settled. There is a stillness to the person who knows that they cannot be easily reached. A groundedness, a kind of weight that others can feel without understanding why. You have begun to build what Machiavelli spent his life studying in others and encoding in his writing. The particular quality of presence that belongs to someone who has genuinely internalized the architecture of power. Not power over others, power over themselves, which is, as every master has known throughout history, the only power that matters. Because the person who controls themselves controls everything that flows from themselves, their words, their actions, their influence, their trajectory. You are becoming someone who cannot be controlled. Not because you are closed, not because you are cold, not because you have armored yourself against the world, but because you have chosen, deliberately and consistently, to know yourself deeply enough that no one can know you better than you know yourself. And the person who knows you better than you know yourself is the person who can control you. Remove that advantage. It is the most important thing you will ever do. The transformation is not complete. It is never complete. Power is not a destination. It is a practice, a discipline, a commitment to choosing the harder path every time the easier one presents itself, because the harder path is the one that leads to a mind that no one can weaponize against you. You have chosen this path. Continue walking it, every day, without exception, without apology. From this moment forward, everything changes. Not because the world changes. The world will remain exactly as it is, full of people seeking to gain access to your reactions, your attention, your emotional state. Full of provocateurs and flatterers and energy drainers, full of situations designed, consciously or not, to pull you out of your position and into a state of predictable, manageable reactivity. Everything changes because you change. You no longer react without intention. You act. Every response you give from this point forward is a choice, not a reflex. You may feel the reflex. You will feel it often. But you now know the difference between the feeling and the response. And in that difference, in that gap, you hold all the power you will ever need. You no longer explain yourself to those who have not earned explanation. Your decisions stand on the authority of your own judgment. Your choices require no external validation to be legitimate. You are answerable to your own values, your own code, your own long-term vision of who you are building yourself to become. You no longer give your attention freely. It is currency. It is the most valuable currency you possess. And from this point forward, it is spent strategically on those who have earned it, on pursuits that multiply it, on the development of the mind that is, finally, your most powerful weapon. You protect your mind with the ferocity and the discipline of someone who understands what is at stake, Because what is at stake is not comfort or social approval or the temporary satisfaction of winning an argument. What is at stake is your fundamental freedom, the freedom of a mind that cannot be predicted, cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled by anything outside itself. Machiavelli wrote for princes, "But the most important kingdom you will ever govern is the one that exists between your ears. Govern it with ruthless discipline, with unflinching honesty, with the long vision of someone who is building something that will last, a character, a presence, an authority that no circumstance can erase." Most people will never arrive here. They will live inside their reactions their entire lives, mistaking impulse for authenticity and volatility for passion. They will give away their attention and never understand why they feel powerless. They will seek approval and never understand why they feel empty. They will perform strength and never understand why they feel afraid. You are not most people. You have seen what they have not seen. You understand what they do not understand. And from this moment forward, you carry that understanding like the quiet weapon it is not to be displayed, not to be announced, but to be used. Precisely, strategically, every single day. If you understand what has been shared here tonight, if you feel the shift that this understanding creates, leave one comment: "I am in control." Not as a declaration to others, as a declaration to yourself, as the beginning of a promise. The promise that from this point forward, your mind belongs to you, that you will not give it away, that you will not let the world, its provocations, its flattery, its noise access what is most valuable inside you without your permission. Subscribe if you are committed to this path. Every lesson that follows will build on this foundation. Every principle will go deeper. Every strategy will be more precise. Because this is not a destination. It is a practice. And the practice begins now. Your mind is a weapon. Use it or lose it.